come back down to kind of our future and what are we really interested in doing, and how do we make sure that the path we take outside of high school gets us to the career or the job that we really, really want. So I would like to talk a little bit about future things today, particularly college. We will be talking about why college is important, how we can apply to schools, and how we can actually pay for the schools in general. So let's go ahead and get started. So why are we talking about college so early on? I know that some of you parents might be thinking, this is not early, like we're a little late, and that's perfectly fine. We're on time. We've got some application deadlines coming up pretty soon, but I'd like to just take a break and take a step back and say, why are we actually thinking about college in general? And what I've been telling students is just a lot about the idea of income and kind of a foundation for the rest of our lives. And a lot of that comes down to the type of career that we are going to pursue. And a lot of that comes down to what education we've had that opens doors to future opportunity. So one of the things that I really wanted just to highlight is how a bachelor's degree does lead most, on average, individuals to have a higher median weekly earning. So we are seeing that a bachelor's degree does increase how much we make each week. And as we see it compound week by week and month by month and year by year, that can really significantly change the outlook of our future. So going to an associate's is wonderful. How you will see, however, there is a significant difference between that associate's degree and the bachelor's degree median weekly income. So when I'm talking with students, I do bring this up because I want to contextualize why we're going to be pursuing college, why that can be a benefit for us. And again, some jobs require a four-year degree in order to get it. And so we want to make sure that students who are on a path for a specific career have the education under their belt that they need in order to achieve that and achieve kind of the reality they want. So in terms of kind of talking back a little bit, so when we're discussing college and how it works, there's a lot that we have to consider and a lot that we have to do. And again, I do share this with students that this whole process, I can help them with that entire thing. So there's a lot that we need to do, but you guys do not have to do it alone. Parents and students, I am here as your college advisor to assist you. And I do love my job, so I would love to help you. So some of the things that we need to consider are the college list, and that the college list is thinking about what's a good fit for our student and where will they be going in terms of location, in terms of the chances of getting into those schools, and even just the academics in general. Is it going to be a good fit for them to pursue the education and the degree path that they really, really want? And some people are like, I have no idea what I want to do, and that's perfectly fine. There still are ways to kind of narrow down the schools that we're most interested in applying to. We also want to think about requirements. So we've got GPA scores and ACT and SAT scores that we do need to consider when we are applying to four-year schools. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also talk about the actual application process and how it works. We'll talk about some deadlines. We'll talk about how to actually do our applications. And so we'll discuss that in more depth as we go. And also, we'll kind of end with some information about FAFSA and scholarships. And you really will get a lot more information about those two pieces in another session, but I'll briefly mention it at the end so that you have kind of an understanding of what you can see when you're in those sessions tonight. So let's talk about our college list and college fit. As parents and students, we're trying to figure out where is the best place for us to go. And I often refer to a jacket, kind of like fit. And is it going to be something that's going to be the right size, be the right length on our arms, be the right color, the right texture, all of the pieces of the college or the jacket, is it going to fit us well? So when we're talking about that, we can think about several different things. But when we really come down to it, we need to think about three main topics: programs, location and cost, and the chances of getting into those programs. So with our programs, if we're planning to do business, if we're planning to do nursing, maybe teaching, maybe pre-law or pre-med, those programs do require specific paths, and some schools might have those programs, but some schools might not. So I want us to be aware that the type of program we want does sometimes affect the list of schools we can have. Like if you were doing business, UNCW is great. UNC Charlotte is great. I mean, the big ones, UNC and NC State, they have wonderful programs as well. There are ways to think about the colleges based off of what our interests are. If you have a student, your kiddo is kind of trying to figure out what they still want to do, college can still be a really great opportunity to explore. So I am going to encourage that if they are not certain on anything, that we still apply to some schools that might have things they could be interested in. So do they have a business program if that student decides to do business? Will they be able to do pre-law stuff at that school if they decide that that's also something they're interested in? So opening doors and opportunities, that's what we want to think about. We also want to think about location and cost, how close it is, how far it is. Is it too close to home? Is it a little too far from home? And parents, you might have your own opinions on that. How expensive is it to live in that city? Are we thinking about Raleigh? Are we going to have to get our own apartment? Those questions will be things that we're going to want to discuss, and more of the financial aid scholarships, again, will be discussed in another session tonight. The chances of getting into school, we can kind of think about it in terms of how likely we're going to get into a school, if that school is a match school, and if that school is a reach school. And the way we can think about it is our scores. If we think about where our scores are, GPA, ACT scores, if they're kind of a little bit higher than the typical applicant that gets in, then we would consider that a likely school. One where our GPA and ACT scores are about the average applicant acceptance, that's going to be considered a match school because we're pretty likely to get in. We might still need to work pretty hard on the application, but it's a pretty good fit based off of our own personal scores. The reach school is another one that we can think about, and that is the one we're reaching towards because our scores or GPA might be a little bit lower than the typical applicant. And if you have questions about making that list based off of chances and talking about all of that, please let me know. I do have resources on my website to actually look at each school individually at their average ACT scores, their average GPAs, that can help us think about what are our options based off of what we do have and what we bring to the table. So that's a little bit on college lists. Again, please feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have questions. But let's talk about requirements. So when we are thinking about applying to schools, we need to think about GPAs. We need to think about ACT and SAT scores. And the thing about typical UNC system schools, so that's like UNC, NC State, NCA&T, all of those schools do have requirements. What the GPA requirement for these schools is a 2.5 weighted. And for the ACT and SAT, if you decide, if your GPA is not a 2.5 and you have an ACT score that's a 19, you will be eligible for review. So these requirements are just the minimums, and you can have either the GPA or the ACT and SAT scores that you can present to the school that will allow you to be eligible for review. So those are some requirements. It is important to consider, what are our options based off of our current GPAs. And a lot of our higher schools like NC State and UNC, those are very competitive. So their typical applicants have GPAs in the 4.0 ranges. And so we do need to put in perspective, what are our options? So those are just some requirements for you to consider. Private schools, on the other hand, do not typically have GPA or ACT, SAT requirements. Some private schools are much more competitive, so it does depend on the school. However, we want you to realize that just the UNC System School has these requirements. It is not applicable to all schools in the state, especially private. So I do want to also mention that schools are test optional this year. Most of them, the UNC system schools specifically, are test optional, and most private schools are as well. That just means that you don't necessarily have to send your test score, but we will encourage you to send that score if it will help you. If that test score is going to help you by being a high score and be something that you can add to your application, let's submit it. If, for instance, it's a little lower than what you would like, it might not match up with your high GPA, we could either retake it or we can not submit it, again, because the schools are test optional. We'll talk more about ACT and SAT in a second. right now, actually. So what we can do with the ACT and the SAT is take it again, or you can take the SAT. Some of you haven't taken that yet because you might like that test site more. It's a little bit, it is the same, it's a similar interest exam, except that the SAT sometimes has questions that are not in the context of an essay, and it doesn't have a science section. So you may like it a little bit more than the ACT, and it never hurts to try both tests to try it out. For the ACT, you would log into act.org. If you've retrieved your scores from February, you most likely have an account, but you can see where you can improve based off of that score. Again, with the SAT, they have their own site too that you can register through. And I just want you guys to know that I do have fee waivers, and I believe all students in our school are now eligible for fee waivers because of COVID, and free reduced price lunch. So if that sounds applicable to you, then let me know and I can get you a fee waiver. I do have a ton of study resources, so many study resources on my website, and you will get the website. I can put it in the chat at the end of this conversation as well. But these are a little bit about ACT and SAT scores. The ACT and SAT tests specifically, they do have differences. So if you look at the ACT, again, that's the English inside the context of an essay. The SAT is a little bit more English outside of the context of an essay. The math is also slightly different. And again, the ACT has the science and the SAT does not. I do encourage both of you guys, or all of you guys, to take both tests just to see what is the best option for you. Again, they are test optional. Did we get a question in the chat, Jen?
We did have a question.
Okay.
Oh gosh, sorry, it went out and I'm recording, so I have to go back. So the question is, are the tests based on the information you enter when you are registering, such as the classes completed or will complete?
Oh, good question. So when you are registering, they ask a ton of questions about your classes and what you've done. Those questions are actually not required. It's just information that those websites are trying to collect on students and match those up with the scores at the end just for their own research. So those have nothing to do with the type of test you get. They have nothing to do with the scores that you will get at the end. And none of that information should be sent to colleges unless there may be a button at the end where they ask if you want that information shared. But no, none of that will affect your ACT score, your SAT score, and it won't affect how colleges view or review your scores. The colleges will not get that information. That was a great question. Did I answer that okay? Does that make sense? If not, we can talk more about it. But let's kind of switch gears a little bit to the dates. I know a lot of us are trying to figure out when we need to take those test dates and the test. The first test date that you guys are going to want to think about is that October 23rd because the registration deadline is actually this Friday. And the reason why we want you to potentially retake that test at that time is because that is the last one for early action and early decision application deadlines. I'll explain more about early action and early decision later, but if you're trying to apply early to your schools, we do need that test date as our last for any scores that will be included in your application. As for regular decision, if you're deciding to apply RD, which is regular decision, those applications sometimes come out in the spring. That December 11th ACT is going to be the last option for you. It does not mean you can never take the test again. You can take the test in the spring as a senior to improve potential scholarship opportunities and things like that. But I will suggest that if you're trying to stick it on your applications, to take it on those days. SAT, those test dates are included on the right as well. And all this information has been emailed out to you guys a couple times. And it is in Rocket Dispatch if you want the actual details of it. There is some ACT and SAT tutoring as well. If you guys are interested, we have a previous math teacher who is excited about potentially sharing information with you guys and walking you through some of the ACT and SAT questions. So if you're interested in tutoring, there is a link in Rocket Dispatch to sign up for that, and we will put you in contact with that previous math teacher from Person High School. So let's kind of move a little bit on to college applications. We talked about requirements. We talked about the college fit and maybe what colleges are a good fit for us. And now I want to talk about the actual college applications, right? We got to submit those in order to be accepted. We do have to submit them on time. We've got to have all the components that go with them. And there are 3 main ways that you can apply to colleges in North Carolina and across the world, right? So CFNC is a North Carolina-based website that will allow you to actually apply to schools. And you can apply to North Carolina community colleges with this. You can apply to North Carolina colleges through this, but it is North Carolina-based. So I want you guys to be aware that that is only for North Carolina schools. When you do CFNC applications, you cannot send those applications to multiple schools at once. That application is one per school, and some schools are not actually on CFNC. So I want you to be aware that while you're creating that college list, we think about, is it on CFNC? Do you have a lot of schools you're applying to? And if so, CFNC might not be the place for you. We actually might want to use Common App. Common App is a place where we can apply to tons of schools all at the same time. And the cool thing about Common App is you really only have to fill in your information once. You only have to upload your essay once, and then that is sent to all of your schools. It's a really great and efficient way to apply to schools, and students who are applying to more than 3, I do highly recommend that you use Common App. You will have to create an account. You will need to add your counselor and myself. You can actually add us to your application, and we can review your information. To do that, you'll go to the FERPA section and allow us to have an opportunity to look at your application. So Common App is a great place to apply to schools. You can apply to the school's websites as well, but for most of you, you may want to do Common App. If you're having trouble logging into CFNC, please just let me know and I'll get you the login. But I want to talk a little bit about these deadlines. So early action, those application deadlines are typically in October, November. Those are just a time for you to express interest, and you hear back from the school on your decision a little bit earlier. Early decision application deadlines, those are also coming up. Those are binding. If you apply early decision and you get into that school, you will be required to go there. You cannot accept any offers from any other schools. It is binding. So I only recommend students apply early decision if they are 100% certain about going there. You can apply regular decision. Again, regular decisions typically in the spring, and a lot of students apply during regular decision. So if you really want to go to a school and you know that, I do highly recommend applying early action because you can get your application in a little early and show your interest in the school. Rolling also exists. That means they're constantly rolling. You can apply at any time. But scholarships also can be a little earlier. So if you are applying to schools and you want institutional aid from them, we recommend applying to school on the earlier side because you may be eligible for institutional aid earlier. They might have deadlines that are a little past the regular decision time or rolling times. So that's a little information on college applications. To actually apply, they're going to need some information about you, including resumes, recommendation letters, and essays. Parents, please help your students think about resumes, think about recommendation letters. The recommendation letters are from letters of adults like coaches, counselors, teachers, employers who can talk on the behalf of your student in terms of applying to schools. Resumes are also really crucial in this process. So if you can assist your student with that or make sure that they're working on a resume and getting those recommendations, that would be excellent. Essays are another part of it, and we have been having some essay sessions recently, and there is a Duke essay workshop on Thursday at 3 p.m. that students can come to and get information about how to construct an essay really well. It is one of the most important parts of the application. There are also things like residency forms. So every student to get in-state tuition in North Carolina will have to complete the residency form, and they will have to complete that before they actually press submit on their applications. We will have an RDS night on September 22nd from 5 to 8 p.m. It will be virtual, and I will be available to answer any questions as you guys are working through that form. Information about RDS can be found on my website, but if you have immediate questions or want to know exactly what you need to include on it, please let me know, and I will get that information information to you. The applications themselves, again, they have specific deadlines and they will not accept late applications. I am available to assist you as a family on completing those applications. So please let me know how I can best assist you. And just so you know, the students will have to submit transcripts to the schools in order to be eligible for review. So we do encourage students to continue keeping their grades up, even if they apply this fall, because that final transcript at the end of the senior year will be sent to their schools. So their GPA and grades will matter even after they've applied and been accepted into a college. So just so you guys know, there are transcript forms for you to complete to send your transcripts. It's called a transcript request form. Again, that can be found on my website as well. So essays are the most important part. I'm going to go ahead and skip reading this out loud, but I've been talking with students about how to construct their essays, and some essays have worked really well. And so we just encourage students to be creative as they start thinking about writing and constructing their story in an essay format. So some students have written essays that work kind of like this. It was a wet and dreary October evening, and so on and so forth. And it's just kind of a story of what they're experiencing, putting us in their shoes, giving us a description of what's going on and helping us see their emotions and how they were feeling about a certain thing that happened to them and how they changed and developed because of it. So I want to encourage parents, guardians to take a look at those essays, maybe talk to your student about what they're putting in it, and continue to be part of that writing process, because the more hands that we have looking at it, the better that essay can be. So just so that you guys know this cost about college, again, we are going to talk about the FAFSA and financial aid to help pay for it. But the typical cost of school can be, NC State specifically, is about $25,000 a year. And when I even say those words, it makes me feel a little sick to my stomach. So we will have some ways for you to help pay for that. I want everybody to be thinking about how we can get as little debt as possible as we're going to school. And some of the ways to do that include financial aid, which is free money from the government and colleges, as well as scholarships, which are that free money that we can get through applications. And briefly, I'll mention that financial aid comes in the form of that FAFSA, as well as loans. And that scholarships can be athletic, need-based, merit-based, or they can come from national, local, or state organizations, as well as schools even. So as you're thinking about paying for school, I do recommend hopping on that financial aid session as well as the scholarship session to get more information, because it can be expensive to go, but we want to ensure that you have all the possible ways of getting as little debt out of your college education as possible, because we know it is an investment and investments take some cost, but we do want to make sure we can lower that as much as possible. So some resources, I do have my website that I've been referencing throughout this. It has so many college steps. I've got a list of all of them here. I actually have a drop down. You can select the step you're on right now and actually get information about each of them specifically. What we do have is a lot of upcoming events. I will just mention that Duke Essay Workshop is coming up on Thursday. So please hop on that, as well as a PCC Day to get information about Piedmont Community College. That is on Friday. The RDS night's coming up, and all of this information and this calendar can be found on my website. And that bookmark bingo, please don't forget that you can be getting some raffle gear potentially by completing our steps to college. My senior folders, you can come get some or just come talk to me. I will be available to help you guys. This is an actual code to my website, and you guys can go ahead and link it now. I realize we're getting close to time, so I'm curious if you guys have any questions for me at this moment. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely, please do.
When you talk about the Duke the essay workshop, will that be recorded for viewing later also?
I actually am not certain about that because it will be run through Duke itself. I don't know if we will have access to it later.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So sorry about that, but I'd love for your students to join if they're free. It is from 3 to 4 p.m. on Thursday. And I will be in the Media Center on Thursday as well, and students can just come hang out with me and we will watch it together.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we are moving on to our next session at 6 o'clock. So if you guys want to go ahead and find your Google Meet links for that, we will give you a few minutes to get moved on to your next session. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's been very fun.